What's up, everybody? Greetings and salutations. It's Spencer Kyte, your friendly neighborhood Spencer man, on Wednesday, November 9th, which means it's one question for every fight, UFC 281 edition here on the SevereMMA YouTube page. And look, I got to tell you, every week I'm very excited to do this show. I love this show. The idea for this, when I started it about a year ago, a little over a year ago, on the Keyboard Kimura Substack, was a way to just sort of roll through every fight on the card to get a little bit of thoughts for myself, even just looking at the card and getting prepared for the weekend, to kind of just go through some of what I'm looking for as I ready to sit down and consume the fights on a Saturday afternoon or evening. And listen, like I said, as much as I love doing this show, this one feels different. This one feels special. I'm more excited to be here now and to be doing this one than I think I have been for any thus far. And that goes for UFC 280, which was a terrific show. But from top to bottom, this is, for me, the best card of the year. It's an absolute, I mean, there's just so much goodness to this event on Saturday at Madison Square Garden. It is just so full of interesting fights, of matchups where we're going to learn something about one or both parties involved. Competitive fights, compelling fights, a few fights that are just, going to be fun old scraps. And we'll get to those as we get a little further through the lineup. But this is a terrific card and I'm excited to talk about it. So let's dive right in. Main event for the middleweight title, Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira. My question is, will we see a more mixed martial arts approach from Adesanya? So we know that Alex Pereira is coming out looking to strike, right? He is a classic Muay Thai fighter. He is a classic kickboxer. It's what he does. It's who he is. It's where he's succeeded. That's what he's bringing to the table. He's looking to find that left hand. He's looking to hit some big kicks, probably some flying knees. He's a kickboxer fighting in MMA. Izzy, however, and look, Izzy can win this fight just fighting a kickboxing fight. He was close to beating Alex Pereira in their first kickboxing match. And if you listen to Izzy, he was kind of hosed by the judges. And he could go out on Saturday and just stick to the style that he's used over these last couple of fights, of using his range, using his kicks, using the full complement of his stand-up weapons, and probably beat Alex Pereira. But what I'm really interested in is whether we see Izzy mix things up, whether we see him as the more experienced mixed martial artist decide to do some different things. Does he mix in some foot sweeps and some body lock takedowns? I don't think he's going to necessarily go out there and look to run doubles and look to, grab singles and things like that. But does he go out there and decide to change the dynamics of this fight and change the location of this fight? We've heard Izzy talk in the past about wanting to submit somebody inside the octagon. This is a good opportunity, in theory, to get that done, because Alex Pereira doesn't have the full repertoire, the well-rounded arsenal that some of these other opponents that Izzy has faced as of late possesses, right? He's not necessarily going to go out there and take Marvin Vettori or Rob Whittaker or even Jared Cannonier to the ground, in part because he can beat them standing, but also because they are more well-rounded and more capable in those areas and more dangerous in those areas than we've seen Alex Pereira been throughout his UFC career, which is only 3 fights, which is a year and a week as of Saturday, right? It's 53 weeks since his UFC debut on Saturday. And so I want to see if this is where Izzy decides, I've been working on my wrestling, I've been working on my grappling, I've been doing this stuff since I transitioned into MMA. You're just really committing to this lately. So I'm going to test you in this realm. I'm going to test you in this area. It's going to neutralize some of your big power. It's going to put you on the defensive. It's going to make you use some of that energy and strength that you have early in the fight. I also think it's a way for Izzy to turn this into more of a marathon than a sprint, right? Pereira's going to come out and he's going to be looking to get this done. Not that he's going to be in a rush, but early in this fight favors him. right? Inside of 2 rounds favors Alex Pereira, or that's his best area, his best time range, in my opinion, to win this fight. The later this goes, the more I favor Israel Adesanya. And I just want to see if this is the fight where we get more of the mixed part of the mixed martial artist from Izzy. Co-main event of the evening, strawweight title fight, Carla Esparza and Zhang Weili. My question is, what is this fight going to look like? I think as we draw closer to this show on Saturday, there are kind of 2 consensus ideas about how this fight is going to play out. One being that it's going to look a lot like Carla Esparza and Rose Namajunas Part 2, which we got earlier this year, which was a yawn. Neither person really engaged all that much. In the moments when they did, they then backed off and reset, and it was a lot of, dancing around each other in a great big octagon and not really fighting. The other is that it's going to look similar to Esparza versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk at UFC 185, with Zhang Weili playing the role of Joanna Jędrzejczyk and running through Carla Esparza in her first title defense. This being her first title defense of her second reign. But I'm not so sure, because, and it's not because I don't want to be the one sitting here doubting Carla Esparza, because I don't think, beating Rose last time really did a lot to convince me of Carla Esparza being a dynamic talent, or how do I put this? It's weird to feel like the champion isn't maybe one of the best fighters in the division. I think she is a stylistic challenge for some people. I think if Rose had that fight to do again, it would look differently, and I would still favor Rose in that fight. But I also want to see if I do think there are things that Carla Esparza can do that make this interesting, that can make this interesting, or at least pique my interest and my curiosity. Her wrestling is good. And one of the things that Sean Madden said to me, not Sean Madden, Elliot Marshall said to me in the Coach Conversations piece that is up on UFC.com right now surrounding this fight, is that Carla Esparza makes you wrestle for 2 or 3 seconds longer than you think you're going to have to wrestle. So she does a terrific job of coming in on a takedown. It's not there, but then she moves to something else and she starts chaining her grappling together. And I think if she's able to do that, whether she gets Zhang Weili down or not, it starts to wear on that gas tank, right? It starts to strip away some of those energy reserves and some of that power reserve that we know Zhang Weili has. And we've seen her over the course of some of these 25-minute fights not fade in the sense of like she's exhausted, but like you only have so much gas in the tank. And if you're using that to defend or get back up or fight off takedown attempts, that's energy you're not using offensively. And that certainly works in Esparza's favor, because we know she can go out and wrestle for 25 minutes. Her top game is great. Her strength is the question mark. And it may come down to, strength versus technique. And is she able to chain together those takedown attempts and just make these opening, round, 2 rounds really miserable for Zhang Weili and make her work super hard against the cage out in the open on good level changes, on good timing. Because, that's her path to victory. For me, that's the path to victory. And I think that's the case for everybody. And the other part of that is that, Zhang Weili, and working with the Hickman brothers at Bang Tao in Phuket, she's certainly going to have been wrestling. That's their bread and butter. So her wrestling is going to be better. We've seen good offensive wrestling from her in the past. We also saw the fight with Rose Namajunas, where she was pretty content and pretty unsure about how to get up from her back and how to work free of that. And look, if Carla Esparza gets on top of you, she's just going to keep you there, and you're willing to stay there, she'll happily ride out 4 or 5 minutes in top position. And so to me, what I'm really interested to see, the thing that's going to tell me out of the gate a little bit of what this fight is going to look like, is who's moving backwards early. Carla Esparza needs to be pressuring forward, needs to be getting in on those hips, looking for those takedowns. because Zhang Weili, as good as she is, as strong as she is not as powerful or effective going backwards, defending takedowns. But if Zhang Weili is the one coming forward, Carla Esparza is in for a very, very long night and potentially another short reign atop the strawweight division. Middle fight of the main card, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler. My question is, what is the value of being the most entertaining fighter in the lightweight division? Now, this stems from a quote that Michael Chandler has said in the cage, right? Of I am the most entertaining fighter in the division and all of this stuff when he gets on his, I want to fight and I need to channel my inner Ric Flair. But like, what does that get you? What is being that guy get you? So for Chandler, a loss here and he's 2-3 in the UFC, right? His last win, last time out, came against, forgive me, but the ghost of Tony Ferguson. In a fight where Tony Ferguson was more competitive than he's been in years. Like that opening round was hey, hang on a minute. Is Tony back or is Chandler slipping? And I don't think that it was necessarily that Tony was back. Now, I don't also know that it was Chandler slipping. I think, and Michael would probably not admit to this or acknowledge this, but my sense would be that he went in there a little bit more confident than he should have been and a little bit more sure of himself and sure of what was going to happen than perhaps he should have been, and took some shots and had some moments with a guy that he thought he was just going to full out dominate, and sort of underestimated the heart and the will of Tony Ferguson in that opening 5 minutes before kicking him in the face and leaving him slumped on the canvas. The thing to me, though, like with this whole I'm the most entertaining, and I think both of these guys, look, super entertaining fighters, all action fighters. And I genuinely love the fact that they're fighting each other and not mixed up in a title conversation here for the moment. But I also don't understand or don't necessarily know what being in this position does. Harry and I have talked about this before, and I'm sure I've talked about it on other programs that I do here. It's all well and good to me if these two guys and Justin Gaethje are sort of separated out from the lightweight division. Then you want to do the who's the most entertaining man in the division and all of that stuff. Grand. Have a little round robin. We've already had a few of those fights. This kind of feels like it almost actually closes that loop. Now they'll all have fought each other. And so great. Everybody from here could go on and fight other people in purely entertaining fights. There's some matchups that are out there for all of them that I would love to see, as long as you keep them away from the title picture, because I don't want to see these guys that are just taking entertaining fights against one another suddenly shuffled back into the title picture. And I'm afraid that's what it's going to be, because I imagine the winner of this is calling out Islam Makhachev, even though we've got the look of Islam Makhachev facing Alexander Volkanovski on deck. It's one thing if these guys were working their way through the contenders, right? If they were facing those up and coming names in the lightweight division that are trying to work forward and get to the spots that they've already been. So if either of these guys were facing the Beneil Dariush, Mateusz Gamrot, Rafael Fiziev, those sorts of people, then fine. But taking this like I'm the most entertaining fighter in the division approach, or battling for such a title, it ultimately feels a little hollow to me, because at the end of the day, it's wins that are going to move you forward. It's wins that are going to put you in a position to challenge for gold if that is your ambition or your desire. And frankly, and I say this with absolutely the utmost respect and admiration for both of these gentlemen, for Justin Gaethje, for anybody that's sort of in these spots, a lot of these guys that have been taking these I'm the most entertaining man in the division fight, and I'm just going to fight these big name fights, haven't actually won anything in the UFC, like of substance, right? None of them have held gold. Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje have each held interim gold. Michael Chandler fought for the lightweight title. Jorge Masvidal, another guy that probably fits in this conversation or fancies himself fitting in this conversation, lost in his 2 attempts to win the UFC welterweight title. And if he wants to hold on to the BMF belt as if that thing means something, then fine. But it doesn't. And so I just don't necessarily understand what it is that these guys are fighting for and why it feels to me that this is going to still somehow factor into the title conversation in a division that doesn't need these guys to be a part of it. They don't seem to want to be an active part of the division, so don't have them be. If you're going to do Alexander Volkanovski next, do it, get it set up, get Dariush a fight against whoever's next. And if Gaethje wants to come in and do that, cool. If not, Rafael Fiziev, let's go. Do something like that. There's been little whispers about maybe Charles Oliveira and Rafael Fiziev for that Rio show, but who knows if that's legit or not. But like, if these guys just want to do these fights and battle over being the most entertaining fighter in the division, cool. Keep him out of the title picture. But I really just don't know what that gets you in this day and age, at this stage of things. Maybe we find out on Saturday. It's going to be a hell of a fight. It's going to be a super entertaining back and forth. You know, Chandler and Gaethje had a fight of the year contender last year at MSG. I wouldn't be surprised if this is right up there with it. I just don't know what it does at this point anymore. And maybe that's the like purist in me and the person that's looking, you know, from a rankings perspective and a sporting competitive perspective. Certainly going to get their fans on the feet. It's certainly going to put asses in seats on Saturday. But beyond that, I don't know what it does. And so I'm hoping to get an answer to that on Saturday night. Next up, bantamweight division. This one gets me a little somber. Frankie Edgar, Chris Gutierrez. My question is, will Edgar go out with a bang or with a whimper? This one has break your heart written all over it. Like, this has make me sad going into the final 3 fights of Saturday, just scrawled in big red spray painted letters, right? Frankie Edgar's 40 years old. He's been knocked out cold in his last 2 fights. First Corey Sandhagen, then Chito Vera hit him with the up kick, gave him the smush face. He's 1-4 in his last 5. He's lost 2 straight, as I said. He's got 2 wins in his last 7, and 4 of those 5 defeats were TKO or KO losses. Like, all of these things are trending in the, oh shit, this is going to end badly direction. Now, Chris Gutierrez is not Chito Vera or Corey Sandhagen or Chen Sun Jung, Brian Ortega, Max Holloway. Those are the guys before these 2 defeats that have beaten Corey Sandhagen. And so this is a more manageable matchup. As it says in my notes, it's a less gnarly fight than Corey Sandhagen or Chito Vera. And there are certainly ways that I can see Frankie Edgar winning this fight, or avenues that I can see this fight going down that lead to a Frankie Edgar victory. But like, ways to win and will he win are 2 different things, and recent results, and that's all I can go on, what we've seen lately, make me nervous and sad and a little like, oh God, I don't want, like, this fight is sort of a like reminder of the cruelty of this sport, right? And the difficulties of calling it a day and figuring out when it is time to call it a day. Because it feels like Frankie Edgar probably should have walked away a while ago. And I say that, like, again, I say that as somebody that loves Frankie Edgar. Those 2 fights between he and Gray Maynard, the second and the third, are 2 of my favorite fights of all time, because the resolve and the toughness and the like fortitude that little dude showed in those fights, where he was getting bashed around the cage early to come back and salvage a draw in the second fight and get a stoppage in the third fight in Houston. Like, just amazing. But like, those days are long ago. Like, that was more than a decade ago now, or close to a decade ago now, maybe not more than a decade ago. And so I just like Chris Gutierrez comes in here. He's won 3 straight. He's unbeaten in 7. This isn't a scrub. This is a dude that's coming off a spinning back fist knockout of Danabak Goril. And yeah, he hasn't fought upper echelon talent in this division, but can you honestly sit here as we go into Saturday and call Frankie Edgar an upper echelon talent in this division? By name, he is one of the most established, most respected fighters on the UFC roster, yet alone in the bantamweight division. But the results haven't been there. And as much as we want to tell ourselves prime Frankie Edgar or best version of Frankie Edgar, or maybe even this version of Frankie Edgar should and could beat Chris Gutierrez, I'm not so sure. Like, we've seen a lot of fading veterans just go out ugly. And it feels like this is trending ugly. Like, personally, I want Frankie to go out and have a moment on Saturday, race out to the cage, kick in the door playing, go out on a high, get a victory, get to leave his gloves in the octagon, have a send-off conversation with whoever's doing the interviews, get in there with Joe Rogan and have that conversation at MSG. There will be tons of fans and friends and family in the building. I want that for Frankie. I don't know that that's going to happen. Given the last 2 fights, it's hard to envision that. Even going back to the last win, right? Close fight with Pedro Munoz. I scored the fight for Munoz. Can Chris Gutierrez go out there and do a pretty good representation of Pedro Munoz for 15 minutes and get a victory? Or worse, knock Frankie Edgar out at some point to where you don't want to see him interviewed on what is going to be his retirement fight, and he goes out on 3 straight. Like, this just feels like it might be. I just want people to be prepared for the potential sadness that this fight might cause on Saturday. I want Frankie to go out with a bang. I want it to be brilliant. I want his last fight in the octagon to be a memory and a moment that none of us forget for all the right reasons. I'm just worried that it's going to be for the wrong ones. Main card opener, lightweight division, Dan Hooker, Claudio Puelles. My question is, where is Dan Hooker at right now? A lot of the questions heading into this fight center on Puelles, who is my fighter to watch this week. And it makes sense, right? This is is he ready for this level kind of fight? As I said in Tuesday's piece, he's beaten some good veterans his last 2 fights, Chris Grussmacher and Clay Guida, both by knee bar. He's shown that he is due for this step up in competition. We don't know yet if he's ready. But I'm really curious to find out who Dan Hooker is at this moment. So Dan Hooker turns 33 in February. He's been fighting for 13 years. He's got 33 fights. He's lost his last 2. He's 1-4 in his last 5. And he's sort of maxed out at not quite a contender. And look, as always, no shame in being not quite a contender. No shame in being the 8th best lightweight in the UFC, or 12th best, what he is currently ranked. And the losses in that, 1-4 streak are to legitimate standout talents, right? Arnold Allen, Islam Makhachev, the current champ. I can't remember the other 2 before that on the other side of that last win. Oh, Dustin Poirier is one of them. Like, it's good fights. It's quality fights. But he went to featherweight, and he went down to featherweight earlier this year, and that went really poorly. And now he's back in here against a streaking prospect. Puelles has won 5 straight. He's got 3 finishes in there, all by knee bar, which looks like his, WWE style finishing move. This is one of those fights where, like, if Dan Hooker's not dialed in and Dan Hooker's not the Dan Hooker that we know, this suddenly turns into Dan Hooker's lost 3 straight, and I don't know what the hell's going on with him and what the future holds. I think my assumption, from having spoken with Dan many times in the past, from hearing his coach, Eugene Behrman, on the MMA Hour yesterday, or earlier in the week, with Ariel Helwani, talking about adjustments and changes in the way they've sort of orchestrated things at City Kickboxing ahead of this, where 4 of them are on the card on Saturday. lead me to believe that we get a dialed in, ready to go, make a statement, kind of show everybody, hey, I ain't going anywhere. I'm still a top 10 talent. I'm still the guy you got to get through to get to the very best in this division effort from Dan Hooker. But kind of like everything, I need to see it. I want to see it. The only way we know for sure is when they get in the cage on Saturday. And so I can't wait. Stay in the lightweight division. Stay with City Kickboxing. Brad Riddell versus Renato Moicano. My question is, how has Moicano recovered from his fight with Rafael dos Anjos earlier this year? That was one of those fights that can take something out of you long term and can be sort of a fight that elicits this question, right? He caught an ass whipping for 4 rounds, and then RDA let off the gas a little bit because he didn't want to really blow him out. And look, Moicano said after his win over Alexander Hernandez that he wanted money fights, he wanted opportunities, I want to jump into these things, and he jumped at the chance to face RDA when his fight with, I believe it was Rafael Fiziev, fell apart on short notice. So he came, jumped at the opportunity, grabbed some cash, jumped in, took an ass whipping. So what was the cost? Great. Bank account's fatter, got a big opportunity, got your ass beat. And so where are you at after that? It's similar to the Dan Hooker thing, right? Struggled in this last one, changes the conversation, changes the way we think about it. And he had a little something going before that, right? Back-to-back wins, 2 submissions, had looked mostly good since returning to the lightweight division. Yeah, he got knocked out by Fiziev, but that ain't nothing to hang your head about. That dude's on a run. But now it's that fight against RDA and just sort of the way all of these things blend together, right? RDA then goes out and has his fight against Fiziev where he can't get the win and he gets stopped late in the fight and it is what it is. It just sort of makes you rethink of again, similar to Hooker, where's this dude at? Where's he fit? What's the next 3 years look like for Renato Moicano, who is 32 years old, who is 22 fights into his career? And look, dude has a great record. He's 16-5-1 overall. He's only lost consecutive fights once in his career, and that was to Jose Aldo and the Korean Zombie. So no shame there. But this is the point where this feels like an inflection point to me. This feels like the kind of fight where he either shows that he's okay with being, and I use this word not as a pejorative, but as I put a lot of value and have a lot of respect for journeyman. So this is where he either shows he's ready to be and capable of being that journeyman in the second 15 in the lightweight division, where he's in these kinds of fights and can give guys like Brad Riddell and others on the rise good fights, win some of them, lose some of them, but stay competitive throughout. Or this is where things just start going south. I don't know that we know definitively after Saturday, but I think we'll get a little bit better of a sense once this one is done. Light heavyweight contest, Dominic Reyes and Ryan Spann. My question is Dominic Reyes just broken? And I don't say that flippantly. I wouldn't fault him if he is. Listen, I thought the guy went out and did enough in the first 3 rounds of his fight with John Jones to unseat arguably the greatest fighter of all time. He should have been the light heavyweight champion. I did a rewatch of it on Keyboard Kimura back in the day. You can go and search for that and find that. I think it's still there. I can't remember if it was Substack or if it was the older version of Keyboard Kimura, which is now killed, dead, and buried. But regardless, I thought he won that fight. And I'm sure it is just absolutely gutting to stand there in the center of the cage and think that you are getting the UFC light heavyweight title and being the first guy to beat John Jones officially, right? Like legitimately, not Matt Hamill winning by DQ, but did enough to beat this dude. And they say the winner by unanimous decision, and still and your heart just has to drop. I get it. Followed that up, vacant title fight against Jan Blachowicz, gets knocked out. Comes back a little under a year later. Yuri Prochazka, knocked out. We haven't seen him since. He's not bounced around between gyms, but he's worked with a few different people. He's had a stop at Extreme Couture. I know he prepared for this fight in Connecticut alongside Alex Pereira with Glover Teixeira and that crew, Wellington Turman, who's on this card as well. But like, this is just one of those fights where like, it wouldn't surprise me if this dude just is never the same. It just wouldn't, right? Like, this is as bad of a 3-fight run in terms of like heartbreaking, in terms of like questioning yourself as you're going to see. Because he was in each of those fights that he lost subsequent to the Jones fight. And I don't think there was any point in that Jones fight where it was like real bad, where you started thinking, oh, this guy's in a bad way, right? He just didn't do a lot over the final 2 rounds. And so he's got this fight on Saturday against Ryan Spann, who is a good but not yet great fighter, may not ever be great, is coming off a win last time out where he showed a little bit of improvement, but he's also stumbled in his 2 opportunities to really take a step forward in the division against Johnny Walker and Anthony Smith. But he's a guy that can catch you. If you're not dialed in, if you're not locked in, or if something is in fact broken in terms of your spirit, in terms of your competitive fire, Ryan Spann can beat you and make it look bad. He is a big, strong, dangerous, skilled finisher, good camp, all of those things. He's a tough matchup for Dominic Reyes on Saturday, and we're going to learn. We're going to find out. I think this will be very instructive in terms of figuring out whether Dominic Reyes can come back and be a part of this contender picture in the 205-pound weight class, or if this dude is just going to end up being one of those guys that, man, he had a great run to get there. He had that fight with Jones that is going to just stand as the like huge what if forever. And then it just went sideways, and then it just went south. We'll see. Flyweight fight, Molly McCann and Aaron Blanchfield. My question is, will Meatball keep rolling? I apologize for the pun. Be like that. I'm 44. I'm not a dad, but I got dad jokes. So Meatball comes in. She's won 3 straight. Back-to-back knockouts in London, right? Luana Carolina, still one of the best knockouts of the year. Followed it up against Hannah Goldie. Again, a spinning back elbow, first round. Big pop. 0-2 goes crazy. She grabs the howler head and just hangs out waiting for Patty to get his work done. She's never been bigger. She's never been better, right? She's got a ton of momentum coming into this one. My guy, Zach Packlab, over on the UFC website, wrote a fantastic profile of Molly and what she means to her community in Liverpool, and sort of the battle she's been waging internally in terms of, as she put it, and it's a really, really nice piece of the piece, and I cannot recommend it highly enough, that there is a difference between Molly McCann and Meatball Molly. And she's battling that, right? Like, it's understandable. The thing that makes that part interesting is that she's in the toughest fight of her career on Saturday, because Aaron Blanchfield is no joke. Like, Molly is the more popular fighter. She is the more established fighter. She is also the underdog considerably, and she is the lower ranked fighter in this fight. Aaron Blanchfield is 3-0 in the UFC. She's 9-1 overall. Her one loss is a split decision to Tracy Cortez that I still don't think should have been a loss. Yes, I've watched the fight in Invicta. Aaron Blanchfield won that fight in my judging opinion, my licensed and accredited ABC judging opinion. And so this is a big step up from facing Luana Carolina and Hannah Goldie. And I'm curious to find out, like, how does not fighting in London, how does not fighting alongside Patty, how does not having that sort of insulation almost impact Molly McCann on Saturday night? Because this is a moment, right? This is a moment for her. This is her moment now. London was her and Patty. and more Patty than her. She was the Robin to his Batman. And then there were people ahead of them on the card that people were looking forward to seeing compete, right? Tom Aspinall in the main event in both instances. Now this is her in terms of UK fighters on this card, in terms of moments. This is her standalone moment. And it's a stylistic nightmare because the 3 fights she's lost in the UFC are against grapplers that put her on the canvas and either submitted her in the case of Jillian Robertson or just kept her there and were able to be more effective from top position in Tyler Santos and Lara Procopio. And Erin Blanchfield has that in spades. Legitimate black belt, outstanding grappler. This could be a very, very bad night for Molly McCann. And I want to see what kind of preparation she's done, what kind of headspace she is in as she goes into the biggest fight of her UFC career. Move to the middleweight division, Andre Petroski and Wellington Turman. My question is Petroski a genuine guy to watch? Like, is he somebody I need to be paying attention to? And I ask that because I cannot get a read on Andre Petroski at this point. And it's because of who he's fought. Right? Like, watch The Ultimate Fighter season 29, where he was a member of Team Ortega, first pick of Brian Ortega. And he looked okay. Like, he fine. Didn't get to the finals, but was fine. Made it to the finale. Got a fight on the finale and beat his teammate, his Team Ortega teammate, Michael Gilmore, who, was an alternate on the show and washed out of the UFC very quickly. His second fight was against Hu Yaozhong, and he beat him in the third round. Got a finish. And then he choked out Nick Maximov last time out very quickly. And so he's 3-0 in the UFC, and they're all finishes, and that's great. But all of those opponents are very, very mid, as the kids would say. And so the things that are working for him, right? 3 wins. You can only beat the guys that are in front of you. They're all finishes. That part's great. Comes from a great camp working with Daniel Gracie and that crew in Philly that includes Pat Sabatini and Jeremiah Wells and Joe Pfeiffer and that group. It's a great team. Johnny Marquez, Eric Purcell, great team. Doing very good work. Clearly got some pop. He's clearly a very good grappler, but okay, you've beaten 3 guys that aren't great. Now what? And Wellington Turman has sort of thus far shown that he's mid-pack middleweight. And that's it. Like, this may not answer my questions wholly about Andre Petroski, but I think it should give me and us a little bit better idea. Because at least Turman's gone out and won a couple of fights and been in there more than 3 times and trains with a good team himself, training with Glover Teixeira and that crew out in Connecticut, as I mentioned. And so like a bunch of fights on this card, this one should be instructive. This one should be informative. It should give us a little better understanding of who Andre Petroski is in the middleweight division and what to reasonably expect of him going forward. Next up, we go to the Fight Pass prelims, for me here in Canada at least, the early prelims. Matt Frevola versus Otman Azaitar. And my question is, what's the deal with Azaitar? You'll remember this is the dude that got cut from the show in Abu Dhabi because he and his brother gave their wristbands to somebody that was outside of the bubble. They came in, they scaled the balcony, they dropped off a bag, they fucked back off. He got cut right away. Can't have it happen. And a month later, kind of a little quietly, he got added back to the roster. He's just a great big ball of question marks. That's legitimately what it says in my notes. Just a great big ball of question marks. So he's 13-0 in his career. He's got 12 finishes. He's 2-0 in the UFC, a pair of first round stoppage wins. But with all due respect to the individuals that he's faced, he hasn't faced anyone of real substance. The first win was Timu Pakalin, who hadn't fought in a while and hadn't done anything in the UFC. The second win was Kama Worthy, who had a good knockout over Devontae Smith, but then was just very mid the rest of the way in the UFC and has subsequently gone to the regional circuit and struggled there as well. So clearly downside of his career. And yes, that's playing the results, but guess what? I get to play the results here. And so I just have no idea with this dude. He hasn't fought in more than 2 years. Now he gets Frivola, who is a good but not great sort of veteran dude, kind of rugged, kind of capable of doing a few little things. Had a good fight with Arman Saryukin a couple years back. Had a brawl with Gennaro Valdez last time out where he got a finish. Is just one of those guys that, like, you know, you got to be somebody to beat Matt Frivola. You got to be at least like capable of moving forward in order to beat the steamroller. And so we're going to find out, because, you know, Frivola is going to come after this dude, and he's going to look to get in there and get in his face and test this guy and see what the gas tank's like and see how legit that power is and see if he's got something more than just that power. And so I'm looking forward to finding out a little bit more of what the deal is with Ottman and Zatar, because I have no sense. I personally, ultimately, I think he's one of those guys that's going to turn up once a year, once every 2 years, as he has, and just fight on cards like this, make an appearance in Abu Dhabi because he and his brother have some ties to that region. I think that's how this is going to play out. I don't think he's somebody at 32 years old that's suddenly going to, you know, beat Matt Frivola here on Saturday, fight 5 months down the road and keep making his way into the top 15. I don't see that happening. But we'll find out if he can even beat Matt Frivola and what the future holds on Saturday at MSG. Move back to the strawweight division. Karolina Kowalkiewicz and Silvana Gomez Juarez. My question is, can Kowalkiewicz have her Madison Square Garden moment? And so let me set this up, right? She walks into MSG at UFC 205, the first show in New York City. Big fight card, right? Everybody remembers it. Conor McGregor becomes a 2-division champion. But that fight card also featured Stephen Wonderboy Thompson challenging for the welterweight title against Tyron Woodley. And the first of the 3 title fights was Joanna Jędrzejczyk defending the strawweight title against a then undefeated Karolina Kowalkiewicz. 10-0 going into that fight. She loses that fight to Joanna by unanimous decision, loses her next fight to Claudia Gadelha, and lost 6 of 8 overall after that fight with Joanna to go from being 10-0 to being 12-7. And like, thought about retirement, had some depression issues that she was open and public about and dealing with. She got a very emotional win in June against Felice Herrig, submission finish. And now she's back at MSG and she's looking for a second straight win. And it's a fight against somebody that has shown vulnerabilities on the ground. Silvana Gomez Juarez lost each of her first 2 fights in the UFC by first round armbar. The first to Luby Godinez, the second to Vanessa Demopoulos in a fight where she clocked the little monster and then still got caught in an armbar. And so it just feels like this could be a cool moment for a fighter that, like, deserves isn't the right word, but like, fuck it. I would like to see Karolina Kowalkiewicz have this moment. She's a sweetheart. I've had the pleasure of speaking to her a number of times. It's hard to go through everything she's gone through professionally and personally in that regard. And so this would just be a cool kind of full circle moment. Maybe it's a moment to call it a day. I don't know whether she wants to continue competing, but it'd be kind of cool to, after suffering your first loss in this building, to go out and get another win that proves you still got something to offer. You're still game. You're still tough. You're still battling. You've fought through that dark period to come back and be in the light at MSG on Saturday. Move on to the featherweights. Michael Trezano and Choi Song-woo. My question here is, who falls first? Look at every one of these fights thus far. I've had something like figure out something about somebody or learn about somebody or how's this fight going to play out or that fight or whatever. This is just 2 dudes that are going to bang it out. And I absolutely cannot wait. And I just want to know which one of them is going to hold up longer. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this, right? As I said last week about Polyana Viana and Jinhyu Fry, there is nothing wrong with placeholder fight card filler, which is what that was, which is what this is. That one was entertaining. This one will be entertaining. There's nothing wrong with that. We need to accept that there is nothing wrong with two dudes that are just in the middle of this featherweight division that are going to be kind of 500 fighters, give or take a fight on either side throughout their careers, that are just going to go out there and swing on each other and put on, hopefully, an entertaining fight. Trezano got drawn into a firefight against Lucas Almeida last time out and got clocked in the third round. Sungwoo Choi fought Alex Caceres. Looked good to start, need him in the head. That caused some problems, and then Caceres came back and choked him out in the second round. Like, they are who they are. Neither of these dudes is suddenly stringing it together, or I would be surprised if either of these dudes suddenly put together 4, 5, 6, 7 wins and got into contention, because that's what it would take given where they are. But like, in terms of early fights on Saturday, give me all of this. All of it. Give me two dudes that just want to go out there and put on a show and just want to get into a fight. We have to be accepting of these. We have to not look at these and go, what a bunch of use. Nah, man, this is good shit. This is fun. Nobody was pumped about Trezano and Lucas Almeida. And when it was done, everybody was like, man, that was wicked. This is going to be fun. And I just can't wait to see these two dudes step out there, stand in the center. Trezano's a New York guy, so you know he's going to be fired up, wearing his America cowboy hat out to the cage. Probably some very patriotic song playing as he makes that walk in front of family and friends and all like that. It's going to be fun. Sometimes we just have to be down for fun fights that don't really mean a whole hell of a lot. I'm in. I hope you are too. Bantamweights. Julio Arce and Montel Jackson. My question is, will Jackson ever stay active enough to make a run? So I'm a big Montel Jackson dude. Big fan. Have been since he won his fight on the Contender Series Season 2 to get his UFC deal in June 2018. He debuted in the UFC 2 months after that. It ended up being against Ricky Simone. He lost that fight. Ricky Simone, as we know, has gone on to do great things. He is in the top 15 presently. But now we're 4 years into things for Montel Jackson, and he's 5-2 in the UFC, which is a very good record. Overall, the losses are Ricky Simone and Brett Johns, who is in Bellator now, who was a top 15 fighter in the bantamweight division at one point, is still a tremendous fighter, very good grappler. No shame in those losses. But when you're averaging less than 2 fights a year, it's difficult to really maintain and build momentum in any weight class. Never mind one like bantamweight, right? He is one of these guys that just is constantly subsumed by the division, because every week we get 1 or 2 fights at 35 where somebody else steps forward and goes, put me in that group of up and coming talents. He's still got time on his side. Like, he's 30 years old. He's coming off 2 good wins. Jesse Strader, he knocked him out in the first round. JP Bays, he went the distance, but set a record for the most knockdowns in bantamweight division history with 4. Like, was on an Olympic wrestling track at one point. He's got a great reach. He's got great big mitts on him. Like, very good prospect. 5-1 in his last 6. Like, this is a dude we should be talking about and paying close attention to. But that inactivity or those sporadic appearances limits that. Now, he was supposed to fight earlier this year against Dana Bakkeril. That was the fight that Chris Gutierrez jumped into, lands a spinning back fist, and here he is on the main card against Frankie Edgar, while Montel Jackson is finally just making his return and his debut for 2022. But like, he just feels like one of those guys that is just going to miss the boat. Miss his opportunity because for whatever reason, whether it's health, whether it's want, whether it's offers from the UFC, he just doesn't seem to be fighting regularly enough to really build that momentum, to really get things rolling to a point where people are clamoring to see him. And that's a shame, because I think he's a hell of a prospect. And this is a good fight. This is a real test. This is one that, you know, if he goes out and beats Julio Arce, who is a good fighter, everybody that knows fighting legitimately understands how good Julio Arce is and what a good victory this would be for Montel Jackson. So if he's going to make a run, if he's going to put together some momentum and get going. Moving that winning streak to 3 by beating Arce at home in New York, he's a Queens guy, I believe, is a big step in the right direction. So we'll see on Saturday night. Main card opener, light heavyweight division, Carlos Ulberg, Nikolai Negumereanu. My question is, which of these two is more for real? So Ulberg is 32. He is a Dana White Contender Series grad. He is getting the city kickboxing push. He lost his debut to Kennedy and Nzechukwu and then has won 2 straight. 75-second TKO knockout win, TKO victory over Tefon Nchukwi last time out. He looks the part, right? Like model, chiseled, sculpted, all of those things. He's always going to have some buzz because of coming off of Contender Series, because of running with Izzy and the crew. Like, always going to have that benefit of a little more attention, because one of the biggest stars in the sport, talks about him regularly, is fighting alongside of him, right? They are all rolling out together this weekend. Ulberg, Brad Riddell, Dan Hooker, Izzy, 4 fighters from CKB on the card. Izzy said, and will probably say this week, he said it on the Countdown show that it didn't make the cut. Get footage of these things. His plan, his thoughts for this weekend is that NZ takes NY. And so we'll get some Carlos Ulberg shout outs from Izzy's media stuff. And he's always going to be, and because of that, he's always going to be somebody that we know a little bit more of than someone like Nikolai Negumereanu, who's 28, who's won 4 straight, who's 13-1 overall. He's coming off a second round TKO win over Ihor Pretoria last time out, and sort of maybe looks more the well-rounded part than Ulberg, who is a kickboxer and a guy that, like, you want to stand and bang, do it at your own risk, but maybe there's ways to beat him if you grapple. Negumereanu has 0 buzz. He's the anti-Ulberg, right? No buzz, but just handling his business. Just a guy that's gone out there and, like, look, they're not big names that he's beaten. They're not, names that are throwing him all the way into contention. As we see, he's opening the card against a guy that's got 2 wins in the UFC, as opposed to fighting somebody with a number next to their name. But you can only beat the guys they put in front of you. And over his last 4 fights, he's beaten the guys they put in front of him. And if he beats Ulberg on Saturday, then we're starting to have a conversation. Then we're starting to talk about, should this guy be facing a top 15 fighter? The answer should be yes, especially in a division like light heavyweight that's pretty shallow. There's always room to move up at light heavyweight. And so we're going to learn, we're going to figure out between this fight and future the next fight for the winner of this, how real these guys are, how legitimate these guys are as maybe potential contenders. Ulberg has bigger power, is the better striker, as I said. Negumereanu is more well-rounded. The theme of this event is that we're going to find out more. And I think we're going to find out more about each of these guys on Saturday. We're going to find out which one deserves to take a step forward. I can't wait, man. We've done 53 minutes of this. It is amazing. I love it. I am pumped. I'm looking forward to, we're going to tape the preview show today. I'm going to tape 10 things today, which, listen, whittling that down is going to be difficult. Some weeks it's hard to get to 10. This week it's going to be easy. I'm queuing up some stuff for a conversation with. I hope you've been checking that out and enjoying that. I posted my conversation with John Gooden on Monday. It was terrific. Shouts to John for spending nearly 2 hours with me. It was fantastic. I've got some fun names on the list of hopefuls. A couple queued up for the next few weeks, so we're covered there. I hope you enjoy them. I hope you enjoy all the content we've been putting out here at SevereMMA, on the YouTube page, on the Patreon, on the website. The lads did a terrific job covering Cage Warriors last week. We're going to do a ton of work and continue to do a ton of work covering UFC 281 this week and into next week as we do sort of, fallout and takeaways, as we will do on Tuesday. So please check it all out. Subscribe, like, sign up for the Patreon. It's well worth the money. Hit me up with comments, concerns, questions, feedback, all of that stuff. I love it. I appreciate it. Before I get out of here, as always, thank you for watching. Please know that you're loved. Know that I care about you. Take care of yourself. Take care of one another. Be good to yourself. Be good to one another. We'll see you next week.